You ever have one of those moments where a single sentence hits you like a lightning bolt? Because today I want to share one that can flip your entire relationship with health, fitness, and success. All you need is 500K, not $500,000. 500,000 moments of choosing yourself. 500,000 tiny choices that add up to a life you barely recognize because it feels so good. Stay with me, because once you hear this, you won't look at your day the same way again. See, most people think transformation comes from massive effort or perfect plans, but the truth is whispered in the smallest shifts. Florence Scovel Shinn always taught that life responds to our words, our thoughts, our beliefs. And in the same way, your body responds to your daily actions, even the ones that seem invisible. Every glass of water you drink, every step you take, every time you choose peace over stress, every moment you speak kindly to your body, these are your units of change, your 500K. Imagine each moment like a coin you drop into the bank of your well-being. No pressure, no force, just consistent deposits. You wake up and stretch? That's one. You choose a nourishing breakfast? Another. You breathe deeply before reacting to something stressful? That's one more. You speak power into your goals instead of fear? Deposit. You show up to your workout even if it's only 10 minutes? Deposit. You're not chasing perfection, you're building a fortune of aligned choices. And here's the part Florence would love. The universe meets you at your intention. When you choose those small actions, you declare, "My body is a divine instrument, and I treat it as such. My health flows to me because I flow toward it." Suddenly, the journey doesn't feel heavy, it feels inevitable, because you're no longer trying to change everything at once. You're simply choosing your 500K, one moment at a time. So ask yourself right now, what's the next small choice that moves you closer to the version of you that feels vibrant and unstoppable? Not the giant leap, not the dramatic overhaul, just the next coin, the next deposit, the next aligned action. Because when you hit that 500K, those accumulated moments of self-honor, you won't just look different, you'll live different, you'll think different, you'll carry yourself like someone who understands their own power. And here's the magic, you've already started. By watching this, by opening your mind, by deciding you're ready, that's another moment in your bank. So let's keep going. Let's build your 500K together. Your health, your strength, your confidence, they're not far away. They're right here, in the moment you choose yourself again and again. ChatGPT said, "When people hear that small, consistent choices create massive transformation, they usually nod, but they don't fully let the truth of it sink into their bones. They still imagine that real change requires something dramatic, something loud, something that shakes the entire foundation of their life. But the quiet power lives in the decisions that are so small they seem almost forgettable. These tiny, seemingly insignificant choices are the ones that build the strongest patterns, the ones that shape identity without force, and the ones that ultimately redirect the course of a life in ways that feel almost effortless." It's the same principle Florence Scovel Shinn taught when she said that what you continually speak, think, and expect becomes your experience. Transformation is not a single explosion. It's the steady beat of the choices you make every day, each one carrying its own vibration, each one planting its own seed. Think about the difference between someone who waits for motivation to strike and someone who quietly acts regardless of how they feel. The first person lives in bursts, big goals, big efforts, big promises, but those bursts fade quickly because the foundation isn't there. The second person may not look impressive at first. They may not announce their habits or showcase every step they take. But while the first person burns bright and burns out, the second person builds strength in layers. They stack small win after small win until the transformation becomes unshakable. That's the magic of consistency. These small choices gather energy, gather momentum, gather alignment, and there comes a point where the habits you once had to push yourself through become as natural as breathing. Every small choice is like a whisper to your subconscious, and your subconscious records everything. When you drink water instead of another sugary drink, that choice doesn't transform your body in a day. But it speaks a message. I care about my well-being. When you step outside for a 5-minute walk, even if it's the only movement you get that day, the physical impact might be subtle, but internally you're saying, I honor this body with motion. When you speak kindly to yourself instead of letting old self-criticism run wild, the shift may feel small, but energetically you're rewriting scripts that held you back for years. These whispers add up. They collect, they strengthen, they become identity. Identity is everything. People don't stick to habits because those habits are hard. They fail because they try to force habits that don't match the identity they've built. When you make small, consistent choices, you're not just completing tasks, you're sculpting a new identity in real time. You start to see yourself as someone who shows up for your body, someone who chooses wisely, someone who cares about the life you're creating. Once the identity changes, the actions follow naturally. You no longer have to push yourself into healthy behavior because it becomes who you are, not what you're trying to do. And it's important to understand that small choices aren't just physical, they're mental and emotional too. Choosing a better thought, redirecting a negative story, breathing through a stressful moment instead of collapsing into old patterns, those are choices. Those are moments of transformation. Florence Scovel Shinn wrote about the power of thought as the blueprint of your reality. Every time you choose a thought that supports your health, your peace, your energy, you're redesigning the blueprint. You're laying down a new pattern for your life to follow. You are creating from the inside out, and those inner choices are what make the outer results sustainable. Consistency is also an act of devotion. It means you're no longer living in extremes. You're no longer relying on willpower that comes and goes. You're no longer gambling your progress on your mood, your schedule, or your circumstances. You become the steady force in your own life. A steady force brings steady results. When you show up repeatedly, even in the smallest ways, you signal to your mind, your body, and the universe that you're serious about the person you're becoming. Not serious in a heavy or rigid way, but in a grounded, aligned, committed way. Over time, these small choices compound. One glass of water becomes hydration habits that improve your energy. One 5-minute walk becomes 20 minutes. One kind thought becomes confidence. One healthy meal becomes a nourished body. One moment of discipline becomes a lifestyle of strength. You don't notice the transformation at first because it grows quietly. But one day something happens. You catch a glimpse of yourself and feel different. You handle a situation with calm you didn't have before. You look at your body and see changes that feel earned rather than forced. And you realize it wasn't any single big decision that created this. It was the collection, the accumulation, the compounding effect of small, consistent choices that built you into the person you are becoming. When you realize that every aligned action is a deposit into your well-being, the entire process of improving your health and transforming your life becomes lighter, simpler, and far more meaningful. It stops being about chasing some distant finish line and starts becoming about the energy you choose to invest in yourself moment by moment. An aligned action isn't necessarily big or dramatic, it's any choice that matches the version of you you're growing into. It's a decision that feels true, supportive, and slightly elevated from where you've been operating. These actions carry a frequency, a kind of inner clarity that tells your mind, your body, and your spirit, this is who I choose to be. And when you keep placing these deposits into the bank of your well-being, you build a reservoir of strength, clarity, and momentum that supports you in ways you can't always see immediately, but you absolutely feel. What makes these aligned actions so powerful is that they're intentional. They aren't autopilot choices, they're conscious investments. Florence Scovel Shinn always spoke about alignment with truth, about acting in harmony with the highest good for yourself and others. When you choose an aligned action, whether that's preparing a nourishing meal, stretching for 5 minutes, taking a walk, replacing a negative thought with a powerful one, you're aligning yourself with that higher good. You're stepping into the version of you who doesn't fight with life but moves with it. Each aligned action adds a small but meaningful deposit into your physical vitality, your emotional balance, and your mental clarity. Over time, these deposits accumulate and strengthen your entire system from the inside out. Think of every aligned action like planting a seed. You may not see the sprout immediately, but something shifts the moment you place it in the soil. Something begins growing, rooting, forming the architecture of change. The same happens in your body. Many people get discouraged because they don't see instant physical results, but the internal results happen long before the external ones. When you hydrate consistently, your cells begin functioning more efficiently. When you move your body regularly, your nervous system becomes more regulated. When you eat nutrient-dense foods, your hormones respond. When you shift your self-talk, your brain rewires. Even if you can't see these shifts on the outside yet, every action has made a deposit that the body receives and responds to. Aligned actions aren't about perfection, they're about honesty. They come from asking yourself, what choice supports my well-being right now? And when you ask that question, you begin connecting with a deeper part of yourself, the part that already knows the path, the part that isn't ruled by cravings, habits, or past patterns, but guided by a kind of inner wisdom. When you follow that wisdom, even in small ways, you build trust with yourself. That trust becomes one of the most valuable deposits of all. With trust, you stop self-sabotaging, you stop quitting on yourself, you stop negotiating your goals every time things feel uncomfortable. You start showing up with consistency because you genuinely believe in the impact of your choices. And what's beautiful is that aligned actions multiply. When you make one aligned choice, it naturally leads to another. Drink a glass of water, and suddenly you feel more energized, which leads to a short walk, which leads to a clearer mind, which leads to making a better decision about food, which leads to more stable energy throughout the day. Each deposit supports the next one. This creates a compounding effect, similar to interest in a financial account. One small action doesn't seem like much, but if you repeat it daily, weekly, monthly, it transforms your entire well-being. The body thrives on consistency, and the mind thrives on proof. Each aligned action provides both. There's also a spiritual dimension to these deposits. When you make choices that honor your well-being, you send out a signal that you are ready to receive more strength, more clarity, more vitality, more alignment. Florence Scovel Shinn taught that the universe reflects the energy you project. When your actions say, "I am investing in myself," life mirrors that investment back to you. Opportunities show up. Motivation becomes easier. You attract people and experiences that support your growth. It's not magic, it's alignment. And the more aligned actions you make, the more aligned your life becomes. These deposits accumulate even on days when you don't feel your best. Choosing to rest is an aligned action. Choosing to say no to something draining is an aligned action. Choosing to breathe deeply when you're stressed is an aligned action. It doesn't have to look perfect, and it doesn't always look physical. Emotional and mental deposits count just as much as physical ones. What matters is that the action supports your well-being instead of sabotaging it. When you look back weeks or months from now, you'll see that your transformation didn't arrive suddenly. It arrived through these consistent deposits, these intentional moments of care, these small choices that aligned you with the person you wanted to become. When you understand that intention attracts momentum and results, you begin to see just how much power you hold before you ever take a single step. Intention is like the spark that lights the entire path. It's the quiet but potent declaration of what you want, what you expect, and what you are moving toward. Florence Scovel Shinn often wrote about the unseen forces that align when you choose a thought with conviction. And that same principle applies to every area of your health and fitness journey. Before the diet, before the workout plan, before the routine, there is intention. It's the energetic blueprint. It's the instruction you give to your mind, your body, and the universe about where you're headed. And when your intention is clear, sincere, and aligned with your deepest desires, momentum gathers around it like a magnet pulling iron filings into formation. Momentum does not come from willpower alone. It doesn't come from forcing yourself through actions you secretly resent. It arrives when your intention is strong enough to create internal alignment, when you decide from the inside out that you are becoming stronger, healthier, more energized, and more self-respecting. Your actions begin to flow more naturally. You're no longer pushing yourself uphill, you're being carried by something deeper. Intention sets the direction, and momentum begins to build with every step that reinforces that direction. This is why two people can start the same fitness plan and get completely different results. One person moves from fear, pressure, or insecurity. The other moves from intention. The one with intention doesn't burn out. They don't quit as easily. Something inside them keeps moving because the root of their actions is grounded, not shaken by every mood or obstacle. Think about how intention feels in your body when it's real. It's calm but powerful. It's quiet but unwavering. It's not frantic or desperate. It's a knowing. It's that inner shift where you say, I am ready. I am choosing this. I am claiming this. The moment that shift happens, the energy changes. Your brain begins filtering the world differently. You start noticing opportunities to support your goal. You feel subtle impulses to take better care of yourself. The resistance you used to feel begins to soften. That's intention doing its work. It's not visible, but it is absolutely potent. Intention also directs your attention, and your attention determines your actions. When you set a clear intention, your focus naturally gravitates toward behaviors that support your growth. You find yourself wanting to drink more water, wanting to move your body, wanting to choose peace over stress, wanting to rest in a way that restores your energy. These aren't forced actions, they are the natural byproducts of a guided mind. Florence Scovel Shinn said that the game of life is played with the mind, and intention is the move that sets the board. When your mind is set, your choices follow with more ease. And once your choices gather consistency, momentum builds. Momentum is one of the most valuable forces you can have on your side. It makes everything easier, everything lighter. When you've built momentum, you don't have to hype yourself up as much. You don't have to negotiate every decision. You don't have to battle with procrastination because you've already created a rhythm that supports you. Momentum forms when intention meets action and they repeat in harmony. Every step reinforces the last one. Every positive choice strengthens the next. It's like rolling a snowball. At first it feels small, almost too small to matter, but with every turn it grows until suddenly it has a force of its own. The beauty is that intention doesn't require perfection. It simply requires honesty and clarity. When your intention is pure, not driven by punishment or comparison, but by a genuine desire to elevate your well-being, it becomes magnetic. It draws in moments of inspiration, drops of courage and subtle nudges that keep you going even when motivation dips. It also attracts results more efficiently because your body responds better to aligned energy than to pressure. When your intention is rooted in love rather than fear, your nervous system relaxes, your digestion improves, your sleep deepens, your workouts become more effective, and your results become more sustainable. Intention also helps you recover more gracefully when you fall off track. Instead of spiraling into guilt or giving up, you simply return to your intention. You reconnect with the reason behind your journey, and that reconnection reactivates your momentum. You don't lose everything when you slow down. You simply realign and continue. Intention makes resilience natural. It gives you a foundation to stand on instead of feeling like you're starting from zero each time. And perhaps the most profound part is this: intention communicates with the world around you. What you expect, you attract. What you hold in your mind repeatedly becomes the pattern your life organizes itself around. When your intention is strong and consistent, life rearranges in ways that support you. You meet the right people, you stumble upon the right information. You gain insight at the right moment. You feel guided, because you are. Momentum isn't just physical, it's spiritual, mental, emotional, and energetic. And once it begins moving, it becomes one of the most unstoppable forces in your transformation. When you embrace the idea that perfection isn't required, persistence is, you free yourself from one of the biggest limitations that stops people from ever reaching their goals. So many journeys fall apart before they even begin because people believe they need to be flawless, disciplined every second, perfectly motivated, and endlessly strong. But perfection is a trap, and it keeps you stuck on the sidelines. Persistence, on the other hand, is gentle and steady. It doesn't demand that you never fall. It only asks that you rise again. It doesn't require that you always feel ready. It only asks that you return to your intention. Florence Scovel Shinn taught that faith is not about forcing outcomes, but about knowing the law is working even when you can't see it yet. Persistence works the same way. It's the inner knowing that every small step still counts, even the imperfect ones. Perfectionism creates pressure, and pressure makes the journey feel heavy. When you expect yourself to be absolutely consistent without ever slipping, you end up feeling defeated the moment things don't go exactly as planned. Maybe you miss a workout. Maybe you have a meal that doesn't align with your goals. Maybe you wake up exhausted and can't bring yourself to push. Under a perfection mindset, each of these moments feels like failure. But under a persistence mindset, they're just part of the process. You don't collapse under the weight of a single off day. You don't label yourself as someone who can't stay committed. You simply acknowledge the moment, adjust, and continue. Persistence allows you to breathe. It allows you to evolve. It allows you to be human. When you shift your focus from perfection to persistence, your entire experience transforms. Instead of seeing every slip as a setback, you begin to see it as information. Why did it happen? What were you feeling? What do you need? How can you support yourself better next time? You become a student of your patterns instead of a critic of them. This is how people grow. This is how people build sustainable habits, not by punishing themselves for every misstep, but by understanding themselves deeply enough to stay in the game regardless of those missteps. The journey becomes more compassionate, more intuitive, more empowering. Persistence builds identity in a way perfection never can. Perfection keeps you stuck in all or nothing cycles. If you can't do it perfectly, you're tempted not to do it at all. Persistence doesn't care about perfect conditions. It doesn't care if you're moving slowly. It only cares that you are moving. And every time you persist, even in the smallest way, you reinforce the identity of someone who shows up, someone who tries again, someone who keeps choosing themselves. That identity becomes stronger than any obstacle you face. It becomes a part of your character, something that carries you through the days when motivation is low or life gets challenging. Persistence is also deeply aligned with grace. When you allow yourself grace, you stop fighting your own humanity. You stop expecting robotic efficiency from a living, breathing, emotional body. Grace lets you say, I had a tough day, but I'm still committed. I made a choice that wasn't aligned, but I'm still growing. I didn't follow my plan perfectly, but I'm still worthy of my goals. Florence would say that grace is the divine ease that appears when you release struggle. Persistence invites that ease. It removes the heaviness from the journey and replaces it with trust. Trust that your efforts matter. Trust that your progress accumulates. Trust that you don't need to be flawless to succeed. When you remove the requirement of perfection, you also remove the guilt that keeps people stuck. Guilt drains energy. It lowers frequency. It makes you believe you've undone all your progress, when in reality, the only thing that undoes progress is quitting. A day off track doesn't sabotage you. A week off track doesn't sabotage you. What sabotages you is telling yourself that those imperfect moments mean you're not capable. Persistence dissolves that narrative. It reminds you that progress is messy, that growth is nonlinear, and that every return to your path strengthens your resilience. Think about how a plant grows. It doesn't stretch upward in a perfect, flawless line. It bends, it pauses, it adapts to light, it survives storms, and it continues reaching. That's persistence. That's the natural rhythm of life. And your transformation follows the same rhythm. Some days you'll rise with energy and confidence. Other days you'll feel slower, heavier, or unsure. But persistence means you don't abandon yourself during those moments. You stay with yourself. You keep choosing small actions. You keep planting small seeds. You keep believing that your journey is unfolding exactly as it needs to. And the most powerful part is that persistence always leads to results. Not instantly, not perfectly, but inevitably. Every repeated effort compounds. Every return to your intention strengthens your momentum. Every imperfect step still moves you forward. And one day, without even realizing it, You look back and see how far you've come. Not because you were perfect, but because you refused to stop. When you understand that your transformation is built one empowered moment at a time, everything about your journey becomes more accessible, more grounded, and far more achievable. You stop thinking in terms of giant leaps and start honoring the quiet power of single decisions. These moments may feel small, almost insignificant, but they carry a frequency that aligns with the person you're becoming. Florence Scovel Shinn taught that life changes in the instant you shift your consciousness, not in some far-off future, and that same principle applies here. Transformation doesn't arrive all at once. It arrives in moments where you choose differently, think differently, move differently, speak differently, honor yourself differently. One moment at a time is how you build a foundation strong enough to hold the life you desire. People often make the mistake of believing they need to overhaul everything at once, and that belief alone is enough to overwhelm them into inaction. But the truth is that breakthroughs happen in subtle shifts. You decide to drink water first thing in the morning instead of checking your phone. That's one moment. You choose to stretch your body instead of ignoring its stiffness. That's another. You speak kindly to yourself when the old pattern would be criticism. Another moment. You breathe deeply instead of reacting impulsively. Another. Each moment is like adding a brick to the structure of your new identity. A single brick doesn't look like much, but brick by brick, moment by moment, you build something unshakable. The beauty of these empowered moments is their availability. They are always right here. You don't have to wait until Monday, until the perfect time, until you feel motivated, or until everything aligns. Moments don't ask whether you're ready. They appear constantly, offering you tiny openings to choose alignment over autopilot. When Florence Scovel Shinn said that every choice is a claim, she was pointing to this exact truth. In each small moment, you claim the version of yourself you're stepping into, and the more often you claim that version, the more naturally you embody it. These empowered moments also teach you presence. They pull you out of the trap of obsessing over long-term outcomes and bring you into the now, where real change actually happens. The future is shaped by what you choose in this moment, not what you plan for tomorrow. When you commit to showing up in the present, transformation stops being something you chase and becomes something you live. You feel more connected to your body, more aligned with your choices, more intentional with your thoughts. This presence becomes a powerful grounding force that keeps you from spiraling when life becomes hectic or your circumstances shift. And what's truly profound is how these small moments compound. A single healthy meal might not change your body today, but repeated thousands of times it rewrites your health. A single workout might not transform your strength today, but the accumulation changes everything. One moment of self-kindness might not silence decades of self-criticism, but repeated often enough, kindness becomes the new voice. These moments stack, they build momentum, they create patterns, and eventually those patterns become the lifestyle you once believed was out of reach. A moment of empowerment can look incredibly simple: choosing to stand up straighter, taking a deep breath before speaking, walking for 5 minutes instead of scrolling, drinking water before coffee, going to bed 10 minutes earlier, saying no to something that drains you, saying yes to something that expands you. These moments are not dramatic, but they are deeply meaningful when repeated. They are choices made by someone who is rising, someone who is awakening to their own power, someone who refuses to live unconsciously. What's also important is that empowered moments don't vanish when you mess up. You can return to them at any time. Even after a day, a week, or a month of feeling off track, the next empowered moment is always just one breath away. That's the grace of this approach. It doesn't require a perfect record, it only requires that you keep returning. Florence often spoke about boomerang thoughts, how what you send out comes back. Empowered moments operate the same way. You send out a choice rooted in growth, and it returns to you in the form of progress, clarity, and alignment. As you gather these moments, you start to feel different within yourself. You feel more capable, more trustworthy, more connected to your purpose. You begin to notice that you're no longer driven by emotion alone, but by intention. You're no longer controlled by old habits, but by conscious decisions. And the more empowered moments you choose, the more natural they become. What once required effort becomes instinct. What once felt foreign becomes familiar. And eventually, the transformation that once felt distant becomes your new normal. Your journey isn't built in leaps. It isn't defined by perfect weeks or flawless routines. It's built in moments, small, intentional, empowered moments that carry you forward again and again.